Yo, what is going on, everybody? Isaac Mashman here, and you are now listening to another episode of Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman, the show that is all about helping you become a more capable individual through me sharing my experiences and knowledge in business, life, and personal growth, and also inviting amazing guests like the guest I have on today to share their experiences and knowledge as well. Today, I have a serial entrepreneur. I guess you could call him that. Not somebody who just has one business, but he has launched several. He's an event host. Man, he has done a ton of different things in his past, decade of launching his business, Good Monster, which is a digital agency out of Syracuse, New York. I have John Timmerman. John, how are you doing today, man?
Good, Isaac, man. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Phenomenal, 100%. And really quick, wanted to shout out your own PR person who arranged this setup, Giselle Levi, really awesome professional. So shout out to her really quick. Now, normally I would go and I want to get an insight into who you are, not just your business and the professional expertise. So kind of view it 50-50. The first half, we're going to talk about you, right? What made John, how did you go through and launch your business? And I was reading a little bit about your story, the struggle of only being able to pay yourself, X amount of dollars every year as you're bootstrapping the companies. And I really want to get the pain points, right? That's how you connect with the people.
Yeah.
And then I also want to get into the more of the technical side, talking about Good Monster, talking about marketing and branding, and, talking about some more of the specifics of what goes into marketing an effective brand. So I guess if we could start out, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How's the upbringing?
Yeah. So, born and raised in Syracuse, New York. Lived here most of my life. I spent some time in Boston, Massachusetts, and a little bit of time in Richmond, Virginia. I grew up, suburban United States, middle class. Father was an insurance salesman. Mom was a dental hygienist. Just your typical American family. Had a great upbringing, a lot of love, a lot of support, a lot of room for creativity and experimentation, with different things, different interests, different careers. So I bounced around to a lot of different sports, got into more like extreme sports, so like rollerblading and snowboard competitions and crazy stuff like that. But I also played football. Also played soccer, team sports. Really got into fitness through that athletic kind of foray, and started working out and training for football. I needed to put on some weight, for high school football. So fell in love with strength and conditioning and the body's human performance. So I actually went to school for kinesiology and ended up being a strength and conditioning coach for the first 8 years of my adulthood. Trained some NHL players, NFL, Major League Baseball, as well as a bunch of college and high school athletes, and spent some time doing that and got introduced to the Ultimate Fighting Championship in UFC. So I got into MMA, and I started to compete myself in mixed martial arts. So I bounced around to a lot of different things, and it fits with my character. I mean, my brain still bounces around to a million different things, which is why I have a bunch of different businesses. But all of those experiences led me to managing a gym, managing a fitness facility. And that's where I fell in love with business, and more specifically marketing, and just loved taking that, creativity of figuring out how business strategy and marketing strategy, and figuring out how to get messages out, and figuring out how to structure, putting people in the right places, and just all the creativity of business, which a lot of people don't really think about when you think about business. And that's where my career took a shift. Long story short for this section is I had a job as a marketing director at a law firm, and I hated it because, no offense to the PR industry, the traditional PR industry, but it was all press releases, and it was all boring press releases, which were just basically, I was told how to write them. And I couldn't stand it. There was no creativity in it. And so my previous business partner at the time and I started a YouTube show, actually Project Rock City. I keep these things up here. These are kind of representation of my different businesses or where they started. So Project Rock City was a YouTube show where we run around to restaurants and bars and entertainment-based places like museums. And it was like diners, drive-ins, and dives. We just tried out the things that made them interesting, and we interviewed the patrons or the guests or the owners, to figure out about that place. And we put it on YouTube, and it was awesome. It was a ton of fun. We got a small audience here in New York State as we went around the state, and we started to get those businesses to ask us to come back, and could we do that for a paid engagement? Could we come back, and could they pay us to come back and do a video and things like that? And that was the early days of what is now Good Monster. We started as a video production company. We moved into websites and social media and all these other things. And then we can talk about this more if you want, but that spawned some other companies along the way.
What year was this? Like, what about?
2009 was when I moved back from Richmond, and right around 2011 was I hate my job, I want to start Project Rock City, and 2012 was the early start of Good Monster.
And that's still when the economy was starting to kind of go under a little bit and making that slow recovery. So I imagine you also had this sense of there's not a lot of job security. Now, I think the most important question is, are there clips of your MMA days out online? Like, if I was to run a deep search on YouTube, am I going to be able to find an old video of John Timmerman in the octagon?
No, I don't think so. They were all like, everything at that time was underground if it wasn't the UFC, right?
Right.
So, one of them was like an open hand, because it was still illegal to have closed fist fighting in a lot of states.
Got it.
But no, you'll actually find some Project Rock City episodes though. Those are still floating around.
I'm gonna have to find the gold. That's the cool thing, man. It's like, you find a celebrity or a new musician that you're listening to, right? A new artist, and you're like, you want to go back and find the old interviews or find the old things. So I don't know, I might do some digging around and see what I can find too. That sounds cool, man. So it sounds to me though, growing up, you didn't really have anybody in your family who was extremely entrepreneurial, and it was more their traditional go-to route. Of get good grades in school, go to college, graduate, and then pursue a job. And it's interesting that you went for I can't even pronounce the thing. I'm not even going to say what you graduated in. I know what it is, but you went for fitness, you went for health, and then what you're doing today has literally nothing to do with that. Fast forward a decade later, which is really intriguing. Did you learn anything in college though? Because there's this whole mentality of college is a waste of time, and it's not necessarily so. Did you learn something during your college days? Because I know a lot of people who listen to me and who follow me are a little bit younger, so they're asking the question, should I continue school? Should I drop out of school? Should I start my own business? So what were some of the benefits of going to college back then?
Structure. You learn the basics of listen, I'll be the first one to tell you there's definitely a lot of minuses to college and a lot of pluses to college. So like, I learned much more about the thing that I'm still passionate about today, which is fitness. I don't train people anymore, but I am still very passionate about my own fitness. So I learned a ton in school that I still use today. But in school, just like having a job, like you learn hard work, you have to complete assignments, you have to do things, you have authority figures that you have to deal with, you have relationships. Like, college is still very good for a lot of different reasons. For me, I often say, or I don't say much anymore, like, oh man, I wish I didn't go to school. I wish I, learned entrepreneurship earlier, or I wish I went to trade school and got right into like, construction work or like industrial work, because the money would have been great, and I would have been, I wouldn't have had student debt that I had, early in my adulthood. And now I'm like, but I wouldn't have learned the things that I learned had I not gone to school, or I didn't go to school for kinesiology. I wouldn't have had such a passion about fitness. I wouldn't have, been such a sports fan and had the insight from having a totally different career.
Right.
So I don't say that anymore. I'm very glad I went to school. I think it did shape who I was. Could I have gone a different route? Of course, everyone can.
But looking back, you're wasting time if you do that. And if you spend time, there's this conversation about trade school versus traditional college that comes up a lot. However, people don't understand what goes into actually working the trade job. They think, yes, I'm going to college, I'm going to acquire debt, which is why you should go for scholarships and try to. That was what I was originally going to do, and ultimately decided not to pursue college. However, when it comes to trade school, yeah, you have 6 to 8 weeks to learn the trade, and then you start making, probably $15 an hour. That's a lot of starting wages depending on where you're at. But you're also going to be in the blazing hot sun. You're going to be behind a welder. So it's like, yeah, you might not have debt, but you're going to be doing something that is going to require an intensive amount of physical labor and sweat and tears and crying and all this other stuff. So it's like that's something you need to think about. I have some people in my own family who would love to do trade stuff, and I'm like, you would probably be better off though doing something that wouldn't require you to beat up your body, and then by the time you're 60, you have to have all these surgeries. So to each their own though. And talking about Good Monster, you started out as video production mainly because today this list of services that you guys offer is intensive, and that's the one thing, start with one thing and maybe expand into a couple of different avenues down the road. But you've been in business for over a decade. Those early years of starting the business, how was the overall structure and struggle behind it? Like, what were some of the challenges that you were faced with?
First of all, no structure at all. Just figuring shit out. And some of the things we had to overcome, I mean, it was from a professional standpoint, actually perfect. So we had it's called the State of the Monsters, and it's the State of the Union for our global team at Good Monster. We had that this morning. And the first thing that I opened the meeting with was our probably oldest sort of ethos, which is be effective, be efficient, be remarkable. And it's before Good Monster was even called Good Monster. That was created so myself and my business partner could figure out how we would compete with other bigger video production and or marketing firms out there, because nobody knew who we were. Nobody knew what we were capable of. We had a couple of YouTube shows under our belt that weren't even real marketing. They were sort of like, oh, this new social media thing is fun. And, it has just gone from cat videos to like some other stuff. So be effective, be efficient, be remarkable was our way of just centering ourselves always back to, okay, here's this opportunity, whether it's some company we reached out to or did a demo video for or whatever it might be. We had to go through each time, how are we going to be as efficient as possible with the budget, with the resources, with our talent. It's two guys who could hire some freelancers going up against full-time video production firms. So how can we be more efficient? How can we be more effective? We had to think about what we knew about social media and the internet versus other video production companies, which were they were started in the film age when they were still using like actual rolls of film and things like that. So how could we be more effective, and how could we be more remarkable? How could the output of our company be more remarkable than these bigger, video production or marketing firms? So we use that ethos to sort of to pit ourselves up against other bids or other work in order to make sure that we were presenting something that at least had a shred of a chance of beating out competition and getting noticed.
How old were you when you were starting to do Rock City?
So 2011, that's 10 years ago. That's 28 years old. So
28 years old. Okay.
So 27, 28, 29 was all sort of that period.
Got it. Now let's talk numbers too, because many people who are getting started in business or have even been in business for years, they're either, I don't like to say that they're overshooting themselves and that they're charging too much, because a lot of times that's not the case. What's oftentimes the case is you're charging too little. What were your initial packages and what were you charging?
We charged $400 a week, I think, to go to one bar and do a weekly video series. That was our first job ever. And it was basically a direct duplication of Project Rock City. We just did it at this bar because they had a little mini music festival every week, every Thursday. And they wanted us to come in and interview the band and film the band and then interview the guests and, have some fun, right? So it was like, that was our first job. We just did that duplication. And then after that, then we started to charge, I don't even remember. I'm just going to sort of take a guess. I mean, we were floating in the $1,000 range to do, just like a basic shoot. But once we got into like more professional stuff where we were staging things and staging interviews and filming B-roll and getting better equipment, we were floating in the $10,000 range to put out a 3-minute to multiple 60-second videos.
Right.
And even that was probably on the lower end of the cost spectrum, um, for our, competition who was charging, probably 15 to 20 to $25,000.
Plus, right.
Yeah.
What was the moment that you and your business partner were kind of like, this is something that we could go out and do for a long-term business, right? Because you can start out, you might make a couple $100s online. And you're like, cool, okay, well, I got a side hustle. But what
Yep.
was the moment where you're like, this side hustle can actually turn into a business, which was birthed later on into Good Monster?
So my business partner, a very efficient person when it comes to finances. So he did not need a lot of money, and was very happy, just making enough money to eat and feed his family.
Hmm.
And he was the first one to go full time. So we talked about it a little bit. What we need to go full time and how much would we need, and I said, well, we can't both go full time, because if the thing goes south, then there's two people that are figuring out how to climb back. So at least if one of us does it, that means the majority of the revenue can go to one person, and the other person can still have a full-time revenue or a full-time income, and help to grow the business. So we were 50-50 at the time. Neither of us were like money hungry. It's not like we were wanting to take money out of the business. We just wanted to create a alternative career for ourselves doing what we loved. So as far as numbers, it was just looking at the expenses that we had and what we needed to live. I was single at the time. He has a family, but had a family at the time.
Hmm.
So it was just projecting, how many jobs we could get over the course of the next 6 months, and hoping we got them. But he had a full-time job. I had a full-time job. He hated his job. I hated mine. I actually got another job, left that marketing firm and went back into the fitness space and managed a gym and did some training, did some personal training to actually earn some extra income. He left his job and went full-time at Good Monster. And we made that work for probably about 2.5 to 3 years, until he ended up leaving the company, very on great terms, decided it was a good fit for him and his family. He actually moved to another area. He left the company, but we made that work. After he left, that's where it got interesting. And you mentioned that, I had to get real efficient with finances and grind and grit through it. But that's something a lot of entrepreneurs have to go through.
No, of course, yeah. I kind of think that it's the equivalent of learning a new language, right? You start out with the basic words, you start out with the grammar, and then from there, you start learning the advanced stuff, and then you can eventually speak in full sentences. It's the same thing with building a business. You start out learning the basics, and then you go, as a freelancer, sole proprietor, and then you go to launch an LLC, and then you realize that, oh, now I have business taxes in a different way, and now I have to do an EIN. What's an EIN, and then what are the articles of incorporation? Do I give shares? And that, and then you start learning the advanced stuff, and then you eventually scale and scale and scale to get to the point to where you're at today. And before we jump and have the conversation about your offering with Good Monster and what your typical client looks like, I also want to cover some of your other businesses, because you have a gene company called Jackson Jovi. I hope I pronounced that right. Did I pronounce it
Yep.
right? Okay, good. So you have that company that
Yeah.
you launched back in 2017, and then you also were or are continuing to be a board member for a charity for children, which I absolutely love. I want you to talk about the charity, not as like a way of like, look at me, I'm on the charity, but more so of like, hey, this is the cause that I support. This is why I support it. And then you also hosted an event with Gary Vaynerchuk and some other people, NoBullCon, which I love the name. I love the name. We could start with that actually. Tell
Yeah.
us about the conference.
Yeah. So No Bull was an idea that came to myself and my three partners, to do a conference that was, okay, this is the no bullshit way to approach building a business. There's so much information out there, right? Unlimited. Google anything and you get information, but it's tough to know, like, should I take this online course for $1,000, or should I take this one for 29, or should I listen to this YouTube video? Or, there's a lot of the basics that just need to happen. Create an LLC, set up an email address, website, all that kind of stuff. But once you get to the next step, which we were just talking about, it's fall on your face and figure it out. but we wanted to try to bring some information to help people fall on their face a little bit less at the beginning stages and even at the growth stages. So NoBullCon was created pre-pandemic. And so we were going to have a 2,000 person event here in Syracuse, New York at a big venue. COVID pandemic hit. We had to change all of that because of in-person events. So we moved it to mostly virtual. Actually, it was going to be 100% virtual. And then we ended up pushing the event again to this past April in 2021. And we're allowed to have some people there. So we had about 50 people in person, and then the rest were all virtual. So the conference took a few turns, but it was always Gary Vaynerchuk was always our keynote speaker. We worked with him and his team very early on before the pandemic. We did a deal with his wine company, Empathy Wines, and had some really cool stuff going on there. And the conference turned out being amazing. It was Gary and David Meltzer, who, if you don't know him, just look him up. And Jim Cavell and his wife Yasmin Cavell, who are also serial entrepreneurs and they own two separate businesses, which they're both, fully invested in, but they're married and they have a family and they do it all really well. So really unique perspective.
Interesting.
And then we had 20 business builders from around the country come in virtually and do digital workshops and then live Q&As. So it was a really unique model that mixed in-person experiences. Gary did a VIP roundtable with 20 people, 20 people that basically bought a bunch of Empathy wine, paid a lot of money to get there and ask him questions. So there was an in-person experience that had a lot of exclusivity. There was a more of a traditional kind of event experience that was in person for a limited amount of people. And then there was a digital experience that was sort of like packing in a bunch of courses with a live Q&A with those people. And it was highly successful after many months of figuring out how we were going to do it. So our next several events and digital experiences should be coming in 2022.
Phenomenal. Do you think that it's going to turn into like a yearly conference?
Yes, but much more. So it won't be one conference. It'll be many different experiences in different sort of niches, helping a variety of people succeed in business. So we're taking a bit of a different approach. Instead of going and having an industry conference, we're having a conference for different types of people. But we're also going to be doing different digital workshops that are more like courses that you can take like one-off and have live Q&As with those professionals to learn how to create a better life for yourself, starting with business.
God, man, I love it. And it takes a lot of work to throw an event. And not only to throw an event, but to get people in the door is the most difficult aspect. Now, you had Gary and you also had some other awesome people. David Meltzer, he's been building, man. He has completely changed his personal brand over the past couple of years. Like he made a splash on the scene because he really was, he was a very big somebody that nobody knew. And then all of a sudden he's like, hey, this is who I am. And then I started seeing him pop up on different podcasts. I'm like, who is this guy and how is he in this conversation with this caliber of person? And then I did some research into his background. So I know multiple people that are connected with David, really, really phenomenal guy. But I got to ask a question. You're in New York and you've stayed in New York pretty much your entire life and your business is based out of New York. Why the hell is that? Because I know that New York City has some of the most aggressive, or not New York City, but New York as a state has some of the highest taxes in the country, if not the highest outside of California. So it's like, what was so appealing about that to where you're like, I'm going to overlook that and still stay here? And I know that it's your home, but what was like the real thought process? Because I would think that, hey, why don't you move to a state or a place that has no income tax, like Texas or Florida?
Yep. I don't give a shit about anything other than family. And that is really it, right? So like I will pay unlimited taxes for the capability or the freedom to be with my family and have family dinners every week. I mean, right now I'm coming to you from inside of my garage before we move into our new office. But it's right next to my parents' house, right? And we just bought a house and we're moving about 7 minutes away. So my brother and his family live right nearby. My wife obviously lives with me, but her family lives relatively nearby, about an hour away. We have an amazing family camp up in the Adirondacks that we go to every weekend in the summer. So that is the reason for not moving out of New York. Like I love Syracuse. Obviously I'm biased because I grew up here, but I love upstate. You know, we don't have natural disasters, so that part is good, especially right now. So I just have a personal love for that. But the reason I haven't moved out is because of family, hands down.
Right.
And I did move out. I moved to Richmond for about 3 years. Richmond's amazing. I would live there again. I'd live in Boston again. We do spend some time in Florida, so I would live in Florida, but it's really comes down to family. But I do want to be clear. We're a almost completely distributed company. So my employees and or team members, because we do have contractors here and there for Good Monster. I also have a company called Good Growth. Also have a company called GFX, in addition to NoBull, in addition to Jackson Jovi, and it's all under a parent company. They're all over the world. We have a physical office in Brazil. And we have team members in Brazil. We're in the middle of transitioning offices now, but we'll have a physical office here in Syracuse. But we have copywriters in Los Angeles and Texas, just outside of Houston, and a team in Brazil. We have a development team in India. We have clients in Brazil. We have clients in Kuwait. We have clients in the US. So I have chosen to stay because of family. Sure, income taxes suck, but I'm just not built to care about that as much as family right now.
Of course, which is hugely respectable, man. So it's like, yeah. I just want to ask that question though and see what was the reasoning, because some people, they're just like, I like the quality of life, and I'm like, cool, but other places in the States also have amazing quality of life, but family is extremely important. Now, do you have any kids?
Yeah, I have one, and another one going to be born probably within 2 weeks.
Okay, dude, congratulations. And that right there is all the more reason to stay too if you have kids, because grandparents are huge when it comes to raising a kid and having like a good household. My grandparents were massive influences on me growing up and had a huge part of my life, and still to this day do. So awesome. Now let's get into, we could talk about the Gene Company, but that's not like your main focus right now. I want to talk about the main elephant in the room in the best ways possible, and that's Good Monster, right? And so now you've grown it into this behemoth that it's become, to where you do have the office in Brazil, you have people all around the world, which it's cool building an international team. That's something that I have a deep appreciation of. What services do you typically offer? Because you offer website design, Amazon management, video production, SEO, paid media, influencer marketing, social media marketing. You offer all these different things. Yes. What are your clients typically? And then what service do you tend to provide more than others?
Right now, we're doing a lot of marketplace management. So a lot of Amazon, Walmart.com. In Brazil, it's Mercado Livre and Americana. And it's simply because all the businesses that aren't set up to go to a consumer can go on these platforms and go to a consumer, right? So COVID screwed a lot of things up, obviously. But one of the things that it shined a light on is companies that were only B2B. They either sold their products to a broker who then sold them to a grocery store or something like that, or they're true B2B where they just make they supply the metal to Yeti or something like that. Or they supply the metal to the manufacturer who makes these mugs for Yeti. A lot of those businesses realized, shit, we have one sort of line of revenue, one or two channels of revenue. Maybe we're private labeling something, but then we're manufacturing something else for somebody else. Why don't we go to direct to consumer? So we got a lot of huge flux of companies that they were probably already on Amazon, Amazon or Walmart.com, like reached out to them and said, hey, put your product on here. They were already there, but they weren't doing anything actively. So, they were researching other opportunities. So we've been taking on a ton of that business, and that means everything else around it comes with it. So when you're doing marketplace management, when you go onto Amazon right now and you shop for a Yeti mug, right? You're not typically going to Amazon and searching for a lesser known Yeti, right? You're going and you're searching for a type of product, a insulated mug or a, whatever it might be, right? So there's Amazon SEO to get you to show up higher. There's Amazon pay-per-click to get you to show up higher or in more places. There's the A+ content, which is all the design, graphic design and videos that appear at the bottom of the listing. There's video ads, there's copywriting, there's all the normal advertising stuff. It's just focused on Amazon. There's influencer marketing focused on Amazon. So we're doing a lot of that. We're doing a lot of influencer marketing just for general brand building and social media building purposes. And then e-commerce management. So I guess the easiest way is we have two main sections that deal with all these different things. It's marketplace management and growth, and then e-commerce management and growth. So that would be your website, generating sales through the website, generating sales through marketplaces.
If you were to break that down into layman's terms, it's pretty much you're making sure that these companies are able to survive in another pandemic or for the long term, right? Getting them up to the times rather than doing the traditional, let's go ahead and do the broker in between. I didn't even know that there was such thing as a brokerage between a brand who has products and then the stores. Like that's something I didn't know. Like that's okay. Taking notes from John Timmerman today. But for example, I interviewed the founders of Popple, which is an NFC business card, near field communication. And they recently got listed on Walmart. They recently got, they're on Amazon, they do their own things. And so they're expanding their reach, which means that, they're not just relying on one form of, to where, hey, you could buy my products here. They're getting into Target, but it's not like their main business. It's diversification, right? You're diversifying your income through businesses. Now you're diversifying how many, places that somebody can find your product. So what are your brands typically looking like in the sense of like product scale and stuff like that? Because I think that this would kind of serve as inspirational, not so much from a monetary standpoint, but people think that they're starting out and they have to stay in that $1,000 a month range. And that's just very simply not true, right? You can go ahead and you start out at 1,000. My first call was $20, and then you scale up from there. What does a typical project look like? But what goes into it?
You mean in terms of like budget wise?
Yeah, budget wise, like a client, because this is the other thing. In order to make money, you have to spend money, right? You have to invest back. And part of the reason I ask that is on your website, Good Monster, which is one of the best websites I've ever seen for a digital agency. And I'm not saying that lightly, like it is very, very nice. And I don't want to know what went into getting that, but there's a tool that I kind of want to talk about that's like estimate your annual budget or your monthly budget. And that tool is like, I was playing around with it. I'm like, what happens if I max this out? And then it was
big.
Siri's over here talking. She agrees. But what is like that typical size?
So right now we typically don't go below $10,000 a month. But let me explain. So, as you standard business, as you grow, you have more overhead, right? Employees, things like that. So you have to charge, what you need to sustain all of that. So as you get bigger, you typically have to charge more unless you have a specific model to be able to work on small accounts. So there's marketing companies out there like, I don't even know, Yext maybe, or there's companies that use tech to be able to automate more things, to be able to do more digital marketing for smaller companies, right? That's not us. We utilize tech, but in a different way. So our typically $10,000 a month is the lowest retainer that we do for the most part. And that could go a lot of different ways. That could be almost just SEO, where all we're doing is building backlinks and working with blogs and media outlets to get backlinks to a site and optimizing the website. Or that could fit in influencer marketing and SEO. So it's flexible underneath there, but our sweet spot is from a low standpoint is $10,000, but our sweet spot's really like 20 grand a month. And that is, I would say, full service for a small company. Small company in these terms is like a $5 million company plus in revenue. And they're generally getting a minimum 40% margin, 30-40% margin, something like that, right? So, but again, that's flexible. That's usually a consumer company. A B2B company, especially a manufacturing company, doesn't have margins like that, right? So they might be a $10 million company, but their margins are a lot smaller. So the expendable sort of marketing budget generally isn't there. So speaking to the calculator on our site, the reason why we put that calculator there is we had so many businesses and brands reaching out saying, hey, we want a proposal from you. And our first question was, what's your budget? And they said,
Right.
either A, I don't know, or B, we want to see what you're going to submit to us first, and then we'll figure out a budget. So we just took kind of standard information, which is, your revenue, your profit, I think, is in there. And then what's your like your rent, some sort of fixed expense, what's your office rent or warehouse rent or whatever you have, to clear that out of there. And then we'll take that profit, and you're going to be anywhere from 7 to 20% of that goes to marketing. It could go much higher, could go to 50% if you're a new business. A new consumer business has to spend a lot of money on marketing in order to make a dent in today's world.
I believe that one of the most difficult things with a service-based business, such as our own, is finding the price. Like, what are we charging? What is the model here? How did you go about determining the price, like the pricing model of this is how much we're going to charge? This is obviously you keep in mind the ROI, but $10,000 for, let's say, one specific service, and that package would be SEO. Like, not every single dollar of that's going towards SEO. It's also going to other things. So what went in, and what various factors kind of went into determining your pricing model?
Extremely difficult at the beginning for anybody, and for me when I was trying to figure it out, and my partner. But in hindsight, it ended up being quite simple for us. We started out hourly, right? And we just looked at the last project we did, looked at the hours that we spent on it, and then charged that and maybe a little bit more relative to the project, right? So if the last project we did was $5,000, but this project's going to be twice as big, we would have charged $10,000 or $11,000. Maybe we needed to buy some equipment, so we worked that into the price or something like that, right? Or some technology. So that was it for the first 8 years, I guess. It was just all based on hours. And that's how a lot of service businesses do it. Attorneys and accountants, and that's still billable hours. That's how it is. With our business, we didn't do billable hours. Businesses with good reason wouldn't like to just be nailed with a bill for like unexpected $10,000 of marketing, right? So we always projected the hours and then made that the flat fee. And then if there was any change orders on that, they wanted to do, oh, you want to do social media plus your website? Well, that's going to be a change order. But we recently just shifted it to almost all of our work that is reoccurring. So any retainer-based work where we are your agency is all based on our internal salaries plus a multiple. So anybody who's working on that account gets put into that proposal. And then there's a multiple that we put on there that covers overhead expenses and profit. And so it's just based on that. So we don't do hours anymore. The only reason we do hours is for fixed projects. So if a website, we're going to build a website and that's all we're doing for you, or that's a separate project from the retainer, that's going to be based on hours. It's going to take this many hours to do it. And that's just because sometimes we'll bring in freelancers to work underneath our directors or our senior team to help speed that project up. Sometimes they might be working on retainer, so we'll bring in some freelancers. So that's hourly for the most part. Or video production, for instance, we'll hire some AV teams or, sound people or whatever it might be, actors and talent and things like that. So all those costs go into a fixed project based on hours. But all retainer projects are just based on our full-time team and who's going to be working on that account.
Brilliant. I like that model, actually. Now, do you think there's power in considering, like you mentioned, we are their agency, right? For the recurring clients that are on retainer every single month. And this is something I've started doing with some of our clients, saying that, hey, consider Mashman Ventures your PR firm, consider Isaac Mashman your PR agent, whatever you want to go ahead and call me as. Do you think there's like this psychological power, like influence that goes into saying that you have a marketing agency or you have a PR firm behind you? Do you think there's anything associated with that?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, actually, when we were pitching NoBull to, early on, we were going to have press be there. We were going to invite, Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine and or not magazine anymore, but, we were going to invite all these media and journalists to the event. So when we were pitching that and pitching to our speakers that we wanted to speak or do the workshops, we said we were backed by a marketing agency. And what that does is it lets people who are going to be partners, actually our sponsor too, Bankers Healthcare Group, we mentioned to them that Good Monster was backing No Bull, and so they didn't have to worry about the brand and everything that they were going to get in terms of videos and social content. That did bring a lot of power because they knew that they were going to get exposure. The speakers knew that they were going to get exposure. If we moved forward with the larger in-person event, the media companies knew that we had some collaborative opportunities, that we were going to share an article that they would have put about the event. So without a doubt, having an agency, PR or marketing can provide some structure and some support to any of those partnerships or relationships.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that, I think, comes naturally as well when, as you're progressing in business and you're making more relationships, you don't build up your network overnight and you're not backed by an agency overnight. Like, you have to really establish those long working relationships, or in your case, start the company that helps you with other companies and vertical integration, right? That's like the number one thing to do to increase your longevity and, decrease your chances of failure. Let's talk about the name, because this is another issue, and I have this issue sometimes with our clients. We're trying to figure out a name for them that's unique, that's not taken. What was the idea behind Good Monster? And then I noticed that in some of your text copy on the most minute scale, it's like, so you can sink your teeth into this project. And I'm like, that is super creative. Now, what was the idea behind that?
Kudos to our copywriting team, because they're the ones that do those little things. So we were called Dream Social Media after Project Rock City.
No wonder you changed it.
Yeah, terrible name. I thought I was super creative, and we were getting asked to do much more social media. The videos that we were creating were going on YouTube and Facebook. And so we said, you know what? All these companies are dreaming to be social, so let's call ourselves Dream Social Media. And the name Dream Social was taken. In true early entrepreneur form, where like everything relies on the domain name. So Dream Social was taken. Dream Social with the Z was not. We're like, oh, great. A little play on, words there a little bit. It's all Dream Social. It like flows off the tongue. We didn't really think that nobody would actually know that it's spelled with a Z if they just heard it and spelled with an S. So we got invoices being paid, checks being written as Dream Social, not with a Z, with an S. And we'd be like, no, that's not. We need to rewrite the check because it's actually with a Z. On the phone, Dream Social with a Z. In email, Dream Social, and people thought we were typo. Like, it was just, it was stupid. And we're like, we're a marketing company that is starting to get into some branding stuff, and we have a terrible name. So why don't we change the name? And my business partner at the time and I sat down at actually the very first bar that hired us for that $400. We were in that bar having a beer and trying to come up with different names that we could move into. And we wrote down a list of adjectives and nouns. And we were like, okay, drawing lines and like, which ones sound cool? And we found some really badass ones, but we were just like, they don't make, like, they're just names. Like, they don't mean anything to us. It's like, we're just throwing a dart in a dartboard and there's a cool name. And so we couldn't really get behind that. Like, there was no, nothing behind it. We couldn't really be proud of the name because it didn't mean anything. So we were like, okay, crumpled that napkin up. And we were just like, let's just come to, like, what are we? Like, next 10 years, what are we going to be? Like, Dream Social, it actually meant something, but we were sick of that and we were going to move on from that. So I think it was my partner said, we're sort of like, everything is changing so fast. Like, these social media platforms, Twitter was just coming out in 2009, I think, or really took off in 2009. Actually, I think Twitter came out in 2009, Facebook in 2000.
Twitter's
5 or
actually a
6
little bit
years
older,
ago.
but it started out as like TWTTR. It was like Twitter, and it
Oh,
evolved over the years. I believe that it's right around the same age though as all of them. I'll run a
yeah.
search as you're continuing talking.
Yeah. So either way, they were all coming into fruition with businesses. Businesses were starting to pay attention to them and ask, what about this Twitter thing? Should I put on Facebook?
Hmm.
Should I go on YouTube? So he's like, you know what? We're this like shape shifting monster. Like anytime something new comes out, we have to learn it and be good at that thing. And I was like, yeah, monster. That sounds cool. Like where there's like monster. And I was like, but even though it's not in the same industry, there's like monster.com, there's Monster Energy, like, so if we're just like monster, it doesn't like what monster or monster what. And I took a swig of my beer and I was like, also monster could have a bad like connotation to it.
Right.
If somebody's like, not thinking about it right. So we're like a good monster. We're not a bad monster. We're a good monster. And as soon as I said that, we both just like looked at each other.
Hmm.
I held up my beer and I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And we cheers. And there we were. We were a good monster.
Man, I wanted you to tell that story, and I didn't even know that that story was going to be that good because that is the very beginnings of an entrepreneur business that is like that. That right there with my clients, domains, man, that is extremely important though. I always start out. We've had to rename some of our clients before. I'm like, all right, your name is Alejandro Patino. We're renaming you to Patino Ames, and that's exactly what we did. Domains available, social media is available, no SEO, no competition, no other person with that name at all, and so that is important. But sometimes that over the top creativity and that passion has to be tamed. In that case of putting social with a Z, social, like it's creative and you would think it's a good idea, but then that's the other thing you have to think about the algorithms, and Google's going to say, did you mean dream social? And that's going to be an issue too that you probably didn't realize. And Twitter came out in 2006. So they pretty much all came out at the same
Yeah.
time. But I love that. And I'm gonna need a hat with the logo because I do like the logo and I don't normally represent other companies, but that's cool. So moving forward, I want to be conscious of time and everything. What is next for not only Good Monster, but also for John Timmerman? Because you do have a podcast, which is John Timmerman Can't Stop, which I was listening to a couple of different episodes. What's next though?
So John Timmerman Can't Stop isn't coming back. So that was sort of a capped project that we did. And the reason was because we started these other businesses. So John Timmerman Can't Stop was basically an effort to start talking about all the things that all of our clients were asking us and talk about, also share that or merge that with some of the entrepreneurial tendencies that I had that I know people like yourself and probably your listeners have. But that morphed into Good Brands and Management, which is our parent company. And Good Growth is our consulting company. GFX is our animation company. And so we started to actually break out these companies to separate them from Good Monster because they're very different services and brands. And so what is next is to organize all of those companies and the content that we put out under Good Brands and Management. So right now we're planning our podcast, which is going to not just be me, it's going to be me and all of our general managers doing different episodes, talking about the things that they're doing well. So it will be a collaborative podcast that is going to talk about global business and how focusing on people is the best way to grow that global business. That's what we're attempting to do with Good Brands, is create billions of dollars in revenue under one umbrella and always focusing on the people, because without my team, without any of our teams, without any of our partners, without any of our clients, without any of our consumers or our customers' consumers, without any of those people, nothing matters. Apple products they don't matter, right? So we're going to convey that message in our new content. So from a media or content perspective, look for that probably in the next couple months. But what's next for me is my new baby girl coming soon. Growing this massive company while proving the point that you can still have time and a great family life while making a lot of money and growing massive global businesses if you hire and trust and facilitate and work with the right people.
Man, I'm excited, and it's cool that you guys are doing the podcast within the agency because that's something that Mashman Ventures, we actually just launched it, and I'm going to be interviewing all the team members. But the
Congrats.
brilliant thing is, I'm going to be having other people too. You know, let's say the chief consultant or the lead audio engineer and producer. Then, hey, you come in and you host an episode. You maybe do an interview. You talk about what you got going on, and so I think that's going to be something that more and more companies are beginning to do to really expand that internal culture outwards, right? To show the world, hey, this is the internal culture, because from the inside, it's great, but on the outside, can other people see in? And so super, super excited to see that. And you got to let me know when that drops so I can listen to the episodes and support you. Now, second to last question, and then I'm gonna let you run and get on about your day. How important has personal branding been for you over the past decade of growing your business?
Real important. In all honesty, I followed Gary Vaynerchuk. We were talking about very early on, right? I stumbled across him. Wine Library TV was his first sort of foray into
super old fan then. Okay.
Yeah. So real early episodes of Wine Library TV. And I just was like, I watched it, not because I was a huge fan of wine, but because I wanted to see this new personal branding thing. Not new, but new in the online space, right? Influencers weren't a thing yet, or at least not in the, they didn't have a stamp. So I was like, this guy's putting out content. Like, okay, great. I'm going to watch him. I got sucked in the wrong way into basically thinking I needed to do exactly what he was doing and that it was going to bring the success. And that carried all the way through the next, whatever, 5 or 6 years is I looked at him and I said, I need to do what he's doing because look at the success that he's having, instead of taking a step back and being like, what's going to be best for the business and best for me. So I would say personal branding has played a huge part, but not in the way that maybe many people think. It wasn't necessarily me putting out content that was the reason for all my success. Putting out public content on social media, I tried it. I tried doing a bunch of different podcasts. I tried doing a bunch of different YouTube shows, creating my own shows. But I realized like I wasn't passionate about it for me. I was passionate about it to grow my business. And so the moment I realized this was going to take years for me to build up this audience and maybe it wouldn't even work. Like the moment I realized that wasn't for me. I didn't want to put in the time doing something that I didn't necessarily love. I would much rather go on other people's podcasts and I would like to talk about the things that I'm passionate about, but I don't feel the need to have the megaphone. I just want to help other people get to where they want to be. So I would say personal branding in that, the help that I've given other people, the education and the support that I give my team. I put out content to my team way more than I put it out online. I do daily videos to my team. I send videos, inspirational videos to people on my team who are in Brazil, who I know are like, they just got some bad news from a client or something like that. Like that's how my personal branding has worked, because we've hired so many people that are brothers and sisters and friends and nieces and nephews of our current team members who are like, you got to come work for Good Monster because it's an amazing, supportive, high performance place to work. And their leader will make sure that if you are willing to put in the work and learn and move quickly, that you will do a good job. Same thing with our clients. So I would say my personal branding has gone into my circle of relationships, and that circle's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And that has worked really well for me for personal branding.
You're known by the right people. You might not be known by everybody, but you're still known by the people in the room who can bring you referrals, bring you business, give you mentorship, give you advice, etc. And you're a perfect example of somebody who you haven't built out your credibility and given your company credibility. Your company has given you the credibility. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it. I named my company Mashman Ventures because I was building out my personal brand, because I love building out my personal brand more than my business, but I see that symbiotic relationship. And so you and I are the direct opposite in that regard, yet we're extremely similar. And so, man, John, it has been an honor.
I actually love, sorry, one more minute.
Let's talk about it.
I love that we're from the different sides, because that is something that I think is so important for people to understand. Because everything on social media shows you that you need to be a certain way. Like if you want to get known, you have to put out content. Very true. if you want to be known by other people who are not in your circle, right? So you just mentioned that you love to build your personal brand. Gary Vaynerchuk loves to build his personal brand. He always talks about like he doesn't need, it's his side hustle, like his personal brand. He doesn't need it. He's building a $200 million ad agency and all these other businesses. This is sort of like a totally separate thing. Sure, they work together, but David Meltzer, another perfect example. I know him very well, very personally now, and he spends the majority of his time on building his personal brand, not his actual Sports One marketing business. He still works on it, but he spends the majority of his time and his team's effort. He has a team that is building just his personal brand. So the reason why he started popping up so much was not by accident, or not like he was turning around and flipping his phone around and doing, selfies and things like that. So I think it's really important for people to understand, look inside and just think about what you actually want. Do you love putting out content? Because then you should put out a shitload of content. Do you love more back-end strategy like I like, and figuring out and solving problems and putting out fires and helping to support other people? Then do that. And don't worry about putting out Instagram photos every day or videos every day. Right? Like, I think that's the most important thing. And I love that you love to put out content, and I enjoy it, but it's not my first love. I would much rather be working behind the scenes. And that's the direction that it took me a while, but that's the direction I go. So I encourage all your listeners and viewers out there to just figure out which one you are now. It might change, but figure out which one you are now and do that thing, because you'll be happier and probably more successful.
Right. And there isn't a right or wrong way of going about building out your personal brand or your company brand. There are ways that are more efficient. I've found that in building a business, it's more efficient to have a strong personal brand backing it. But then you have some people who, like, that no matter what ROI you can tell them about, it doesn't matter, because now they're sacrificing privacy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But still, take a step back and do what you ultimately want to do, and understand that there are going to be benefits to growing your personal brand first and your company second, but there are also going to be different sets of benefits with your business. There's no, like, I guess you could say, firm set of cons for either. It's really a personal choice. And, normally I wouldn't have a guest on that doesn't have a personal brand, or like on the online digital space where they're like X, Y, and Z, but I knew I wanted you to be on because you didn't just have a PR person, right? Anybody can have somebody who's doing a PR, but then you had a PR person who's actually working for your company, not some freelance PR specialist. And so that stood out. And then aside from that, you have this company and you have the results, you have the testimonials, your social medias have the quality of work, and it's not some just like Canva freelance type of thing. This is multi-million-dollar level production. So John, brother, the final question is, where can people find you? I was building it up.
Yeah. So best way, LinkedIn. And I'm past year and a half, 2 years, I've been loving LinkedIn. I took a little break, towards the end of the summer, but that's where a lot of my content that I do produce was going out, because I thought that that's where I could affect the most people. It's also, in a selfish way, where we could attract the most team members and employees to our company and our values, as well as clients. But head over to LinkedIn, hit me up, John Timmerman on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I'm pretty responsive over there. Would love to chat.
Sounds good. And if somebody wanted to work with Good Monster, how do they do that?
Thegoodmonster.com search. I don't know if / work or what, but thegoodmonster.com. There's a job section on there. We're hiring all the time.
Brilliant. Well, John, brother, it has been an honor to have you on. And guys, you just got done listening to another fantastic interview on Chase the Vision with John Timmerman. Expect monologues every single Monday and interviews with fantastic people like Mr. Timmerman every single Friday.